Good morning and welcome back to our garden. Now, today is the beginning of February, and if you're like me and you love to garden, spring fever has hit, and you just want to start all the seeds right now. But some seeds, it is time, like onions. We sowed those in our most recent vlog in the basement. And it's also time for some of my slow growing flowers. And we're going to sow those today. But before that, there's a few things we need to do in the garden. But first, let's feed the birds and the squirrels. Now, I missed filming, but I just saw a squirrel collecting leaves for a nest. And that tells me soon they're going to have their babies. I've noticed lately they've been extra hungry. So let's go ahead and help them out. Now we're going to plant out those onions right along here because this side of the garden gets more sun. The opposite side has equal sun in the spring, but once the blackberry leaf's out, it's more shaded over there. And these onions are going to need sun all summer long. So let's go ahead and harvest this kale, kohlrabi, and that little bit of bok choy. So for that, we need to go get the basket. And while we're in here, let's go ahead and check on the community shelf. We had some snow this morning, so let's see how those paper yard waste bags are doing. Oh, they still look okay, and more than half have been taken. Now see the strawberries along here? They are an excellent companion plant for the onions. But these hoops, they're in the wrong place. So we might as well go ahead and collect them and store them in the garage. Look at that. These all survived the sub-freezing temperatures for 2 weeks, where it was in the teens and single digits. Now they did have a cover, but they were also survived 1.5 feet of snow. They look good. Now I used the leaves. But that kale, wow, it's starting to grow again. It is a real powerhouse, a survivor. Now while this green soaks, we need to empty out this kale because we need this container. And this is what we harvested in our most recent video, the Napa cabbage. We're going to dehydrate it because my number one way to use my greens is dehydrated. I grind them up like this. Hang on. So that's the first step, and this is the second step, and this is what the end up is. So I dry them raw, about 120 degrees or less. And then I grind them up in a food processor or crunch them up by hand. And that's what's in this jar. That's that stage. And last, I'll grind them into a powder in this coffee grinder. And I only use this one for greens. And from there, I fill up capsules. And these are some green supplements. It's a variety, a mixture of greens. And I take 12 every day, 3 at each meal and snack. That's the easiest way for me to eat my greens. And you saw that squirrel that was up there on the fence? It was looking right at me through the kitchen window because it knows I'm the one that puts out the food. And yesterday I forgot to feed them. And while I was resting in the living room, the squirrel tapped on the living room window over there and looked right at me. Okay, let's leave the animals to eat and go down in the basement and start some flower seeds. The lettuce is only 2 days old and has already grown so much. I think it's more than doubled. It really grows fast. So the furnace room is warm, so I take off my long sleeve shirt. And this is the place where I start all of my seeds. It's perfect here. It's warm. I've got wood beams to hang the chains for the lights. I have water and a drain. It's got everything that I need. So today we're going to start balcony mix petunias. They're a dwarf variety. I've used this variety for many years, so my seed's going to be a mixture of my own saved seed and some fresh seed I think I bought last year. And they are tiny. And they do require light to germinate. And we're going to do 3 colors of another flower, vinca. Now, I've never grown these from seed before. 2 years ago, I bought some plants online through Home Depot, and they did fantastic in my green stock. I loved the results. They're heat and drought tolerant. They got big and bushy with lots of color, and they were the last flower to die from a freeze. So I want to try to grow them myself. And both of these seeds need to be started 12 weeks before the last freeze. Now, the petunias, from my experience, they need that time. I think the packet says 8 to 10 weeks, but I found they need more like 12. I want to give them plenty of time to get big and bushy. And I'm going to use a 10 by 10 extra sturdy bootstrap farmer tray, along with the 2-inch soil blocker. And I'm going to cover it with a dome. a greenhouse dome. This is an old Jiffy dome. It's from those Jiffy greenhouses you see in the store. They have those little flat pellets and you add water and they expand. Have you seen those before? That's what that's from. And then I have some new ones that I bought a few years ago, and it was really hard to find new ones that were cheap, but I think I have a link for that on Amazon. And I always cover all my seeds with domes. It helps hold in the moisture. Now let me show you the soil I'm going to use. I just opened it, so it's kind of awkward to pick it up. It's my absolute favorite brand, ProMix. And I either use the moisture control, which actually everything right now in the grow room is planted in that, but I'm out of it. And this year I decided to buy the organic. Yeah, it says garden, but it is a potting soil mix. I like that they come compacted. They're rectangular, they have a handle, and they stack well. They're easy to store. I buy them from Home Depot. So I like to put 25 soil blocks in this 10 by 10 tray. And it's a little bit tricky, but it can be done. Let me show you how. Now, the first 4 rows of 4, that's simple. That's easy. Really straightforward. So just take your time, and with experience, you'll learn the trick to it. Now, I like that one dome will fit over 2 10 by 10 trays. Because, the long trays are 10 by 20. But filling one tray up with the same type of seed is often just too many of one kind of plant for me. So first, we've got a tag, and we're going to start the petunias. There's one spot left here in the grow lights, and it's perfect because they're going to require this light to germinate. And look how tiny those seeds are. And most people just sprinkle them over the top of a tray, but I prefer to put them into individual soil blocks. Of course, I will have to thin them later. Now the petunias are going to germinate in about 7 to 15 days. Now, let's look at the vinca. They're not as tiny. This is a much better size. They're not huge, but it's better. Let me show you. These I can actually count out. I have the tags ready. And I want to plant 50 all together. I did mention where I'm going to plant these. Most of my garden is an in-ground garden. I prefer it that way. It requires much less water. But along the side of our tall, long, narrow rowhouse, the area between our rowhouse and the rowhouse next door, I have 4 green stalks. And I'm going to have these flowers in both green stalks, 16 plants of each. And in the front, I have some porch pots. After I finish sowing these seeds, I'll show you where. Now, vinca is small. It's going to be an 8-inch plant and about 8 to 12 inches wide. And I have another garden. It's a memorial garden for my son. And this is what I want to plant there. So I need to make sure I have enough to fill that space. So we're going to try 50. And what I don't use, I can put on the community shelf. Now the petunias, they do require light to germinate. Most seeds don't, but petunias do, and that's the reason I did not put any soil over those little holes, just a little bit of water. But the vinca requires it to be dark, and that's the reason I covered the seeds with soil. Most of the time that is what I do. Mostly I do it for moisture, but this time I did it to make those seeds be in the dark. And I'm not going to put it into the grow light yet. It's going to take about 7 to 21 days to germinate. And I read, be careful because they don't like to be moist. And once they germinate, if you leave them in the damp, they're going to rot. So I put them close to this other seed so I can keep my eye on them every day. Okay, let's clean up and then go up and I'll show you where I'm going to plant these flowers. And they're both summer flowers, so they're going to go out 2 weeks after the last freeze, about mid-May, Mother's Day. Now you see the difference between the regular cheap trays, they're weak, and the bootstrap farmer trays, how strong and sturdy they are. I was able to pick that up with one hand. I was able to buy some with some Christmas money. Now 4 green stalks. And in winter I unstack them and I cover them with fleece to protect them. But they'll get stacked back up later. And this is where the flowers are going to be planted out. I like to alternate 1 pocket flowers, 1 pocket greens, 1 pocket flowers, 1 pocket greens. And our greens are strawberries. Now they'll grow year round. And herbs. Each green stalk is going to have its own herb. And creeping Jenny, a viney plant. Those stay in the green stalks. Then we're going to have spring flowers and summer flowers. In spring, we're going to put pansies, which are already there. And later, we're going to put some stock and some snapdragons. Probably start those the next vlog. Then we'll switch those out in the summer for the petunias, the vinca, and some marigolds. And we'll get them all stacked up. Now, I like to plant on a diagonal. I don't plant all the same for each tier. I like that cascading effect. You'll see what I'm talking about in the spring. Now these are the porch pots, and right now they're looking kind of sad in winter. But come spring, these pansies are just gonna explode. And hopefully the sweet alyssum that we sowed in here recently, it's gonna cascade over and bush out. And later we're gonna add snapdragons and some stalk. Summer, we'll switch those for petunias, and those really cascade over beautifully, and hopefully some of the vinca. This is the window that squirrel was tapping on. My chair's right over there, and it was looking right at me. That's interesting. I wonder if it'll ever do that again. Are you excited about starting seeds? Let me know what you're doing. It's a great time of year. I love it. Every year I feel like it's just a miracle. I've been growing my own seeds for probably about 14 or 15 years, but I'm still amazed every time that little bitty tiny thing sprouts and becomes a plant that makes food or beautiful flowers. Good morning, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It's still the beginning of February and time to start more seeds. But before that, before we go down to the basement and start seeds, there's some things we need to get done in the garden. But first, let's feed the birds and the squirrels. Come on. Now I want to harvest some more greens, but it's still below freezing. So let's wait until the temperature warms up a little bit because we don't want to damage the leaves. But we can collect our supplies, and remember that community shelf behind the garage? I have some things that I want to add. Some seeds to give away, and a variety of pots, along with some old weak trays I don't need anymore. Well, it's good. All those yard waste bags, they're all gone. So let's flip this sign. My biggest challenge is the wind. I might probably add some more tape to those seed bags. But I absolutely love sharing with the community. Now soon the sun's going to reach this area and we're going to be able to harvest. But let's go in the front right now and do a few little cleanup tasks. So we need to get all of this and these over here. There's a variety of bricks that we use to support the Christmas tree we had in the front. And then there's these pots that people threw for curbside trash day, and Dale and I collected those, and we just kind of left them here. So now's a good time to do these little filler jobs. You know, those little jobs you just put off because they're not a priority? But while we're waiting for the greens to warm up, let's take care of these things. Now while we're in the front, let me show you one of my persistent weeds. They have a variety of names, but they're a kind of an onion. A 3-cornered leek. They're everywhere in this city. They're from Asia or Europe or something, but they're invasive. You can eat them, but I really don't have any use for them. Now, where I have the cardboard, it's blocked them and they don't come up, but they only come through the cracks in those areas. So maybe along here the cardboard wasn't lined up properly. But along the front of this garden, I have all my bulbs, and I can't cover that with cardboard. So what am I going to do about this? Well, I'm going to wait until they flower, but before those flowers go to seeds, I'll pull them up. I've tried in the past digging up all those tiny little onion bulbs, but it is so much work, and they still come back. Now I'm going to wait to pull them also, because if you saw those daffodils right there, they're starting to come up, and I don't want to accidentally pull up the wrong thing. Now over here in my neighbor's yard, this is wild garlic, and it produces these little tiny bulbs. But I have been able to get that out of my garden. Okay, it's 37 degrees now, so let's harvest these greens. Now the greens along here, it's just a variety. We have kohlrabi, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and I think a little bit of broccoli. Oh, and we have chard too. And I don't want the vegetables. I just want the green leaves. So let's go ahead and get them all. But first, let's pull up these hoops because they're in my way. And we're going to store those in the garage. We will use them again in the spring. We're going to have a ring of daffodils before you know it. Okay, let's leave those greens to soak and let's get to the fun job, starting seeds. And today we're going to start some snapdragons. And we're also going to start red cabbage, stock, and stevia. Now we're going to start with the stevia. You know, that sweet green leaf that grows on a plant? A lot of people are curious how to grow it, so I thought I would show y'all how. Now I've grown it before from seeds, and I've always used botanical interest seeds, and I've had really good success with those. This year, I'm going to be trying seeds from Baker Creek. Now, I want to warn you, some herbs, and specifically stevia, most of the seeds are sterile. they won't germinate. And it won't be the seed company's fault. So we're going to go ahead and plant this full packet to see how many actually come up. When you buy these as a plant from the nursery, most of those come from cuttings. That really is the best way to start and make a new stevia plant. And the seeds are tiny. Look at that. Now, anytime you research seed information, you're going to find a variety of info depending on where you look. So I found to start it 10 weeks before your last freeze. And that time's going to vary about where you get your information. Right now it's 11 weeks before our last freeze, so this is perfect for me. They're going to germinate from 10 to 21 days. I'm going to want to put them outside mid-May here, 2 weeks after your last freeze. That's going to be pretty standard. Now the seeds are going to stick to that little plastic packet. So be careful and just take your time. And I used all the seeds. I counted 16. I'm not going to put any soil on top of them. Just put them in there with a little drop of water because they're going to need the light to germinate. You don't want to flood them. You don't want them to flow out of the hole. And put them under your lights. Now look at these. This is snapdragon seeds, and they are like the stevia. They are tiny. Now, these are my own saved seeds. This will be my 3rd year using my own snapdragon seeds. Originally, I bought them from Baker Creek, and I think they were the cherry twist variety. They are an heirloom. It's easy to save snapdragon seeds. Now, like the stevia, we're going to use the soil blocks, and we're not going to cover them with soil. They do need light to germinate. Now, snapdragons should start popping up in about 10 to 14 days. Now, they like cool weather. So mid-April, or, well, somewhere between early and mid-April, we'll plant them out in the garden. Now, another cool loving flower is stock. Let me show you the seeds. They kind of look like pepper seeds. Now, these are not heirloom. I bought these from Botanical Interests. They are hybrid. It's going to have pink, yellow, purple, and white. But I'll try to save these seeds too. This is my first time growing stock. Starting about 8 weeks before the last freeze, so I have plenty of time. Looking at my notes, it says 3 to 20 days to germinate. I found a variety of answers to that. And like the snapdragons, they require light, so don't put soil on top of them, just a little bit of water. And again, don't flood them out. And I'm going to use a dome on them to hold in the moisture. Oh, and I'm going to plant them out in the garden mid-April. I'm going to put these flowers either in the green stalks or in the front porch pots. Now the last thing we're going to start is the red cabbage, and I bought these seeds from Botanical Interests a few years ago. The variety is Red Acres cabbage, and it's a hybrid too. Again, seeds are small. Here's what they look like. But it's better than those snapdragons. Now I am going to put soil on top of these because they don't need light to germinate. And they're going to germinate in 7 to 12 days. Starting them now, let's see what my notes say. It says 8 to 10 weeks before the last freeze. 11 weeks is perfect. I'm going to plant them outside in the ground early to mid-April. Now the cabbage is going to be mature in 75 to 100 days. I'm growing it for dill salads. Now let's have a lettuce update. They're looking really good. These along here, we sowed these seeds in November and potted them up in December. These are the last of that batch. I already harvested all the big heads of lettuce. These were actually the runts. Now let me check my notes for a second. Let me pick it up here. Where is it? Okay, these over here, they're 11 weeks old. But from the time we potted them up into these 4-inch pots, it's been, let me see, it's been 7 weeks. So these are 7 weeks old. Gonna try to keep them going a few more weeks. Now the new lettuce, it's only 13 days old. Look at that. That's red oak leaf lettuce. It is my champ. I've been saving those seeds for, I think this is the 12th year, 11th or 12th year. I've been growing my own lettuce from my own seeds. We got some other varieties too. And we're growing them inside right now because it's just too cold outside for young lettuce. Now, I also 2 weeks ago started playing with growing beets and radishes inside. You see that? What about this one? Oh, we'll see how that goes. Again, those are for dill salads. Now, the petunias and the vinca, it hasn't been enough time for those to germinate. But the onions that we planted 7 days ago, they're coming up. I'm excited to show you. Except for the stevia, everything else is going to need to be thinned. The stevia, I just put 1 seed in each soil block, but everything else I sprinkled several. Now, did you notice I redesigned the lights and the shelves? I just needed more space. I think it looks good. I really enjoy starting seeds. It holds so much hope in the promise of new life. So what seeds have you started recently or plan to start? Let me know. Now we need to finish washing those greens and get them dehydrating. I used to freeze my greens, but boy, my freezer filled up fast. So now I prefer to dehydrate them. I love these rich colors. The purples, the dark green, the reds. Can you see that? There's yellow too in there. There's a variety of nutrition in those colors and health benefits, healthy chemicals, cancer-fighting chemicals, anti-inflammatory chemicals, lots of health benefits. I use it to combat my arthritis. And that's going to compress really quickly. Now see up here, the little top part of this jar? Those are the greens that we harvested and dehydrated in our last video. Okay, let's get all these scraps out to the compost and clean up. We'll put all these pots on the community shelf probably tomorrow. Now we still have turnips and some greens along this side. And of course we have our strawberries over here. And then we have carrots in the ground back in this area. And we also have some baby lettuce, parsley, and celery. Then we have cabbages, onions, and beets that we're growing to save the seed. Hopefully. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to start pepper seeds. And these are my 4 top peppers. 1 sweet and 3 hot. So we're going to use some soil blocks, 2-inch. And I've already made a tray full. I'm using this 10 by 10 strong, sturdy bootstrap farmer tray. It's going to hold 25 soil blocks. And we're going to be planting a good size, about 7-inch tapered, thin-walled sweet red pepper. Great for sauteing or grilling. It is an heirloom variety. And it's from northern Macedonia originally. And it's called Ivarski. And this is the 3rd year I'm using my own saved seed. Now you're going to start all your pepper seeds about 8 to 10 weeks before your last frost. And here our average last frost is at the end of April. Now it's mid-February right now, and it's a perfect time to start our pepper seeds. Now pepper seeds need a temperature between 70 and 90 degrees to germinate. And this is our furnace room, but we're having an unusually warm week, which isn't normal for February. And the furnace just isn't running very much. So we're going to go ahead and put these on a heat mat to help them stay warm. I typically put about 3 seeds in each hole because I have plenty of seeds, but later we will have to thin. I like to put a little bit of soil on top of each seed hole. I've experienced growing a variety of sweet heirloom peppers. Red and yellow, orange and purple, and even chocolate. But these are my top producers. Last year, I put over 100 pounds in the freezer, plus everything I ate fresh. And my garden is only 660 square feet all together. I grow in a very small space, and these are my top pepper. Now my 3 spicy peppers, those seeds are originally from Botanical Interests. I love that seed company. They have the most beautiful packets with so much information, and their website even has growing guides. Now this early jalapeno, it is an heirloom. But the red and yellow cayenne, those are hybrids. But I've successfully saved all of these seeds for about, 10 years. I'm only growing a few spicy peppers. I don't need very many. One plant makes an abundance. Last year I didn't even grow any at all, because in 1 year I grow about 2 years worth of peppers. But I'm out. I tend to dehydrate them and use them as pepper flakes. So we gotta grow some more. Now if it's warm enough, these should germinate in about 4 to 7 days. If it's not warm enough, it might take 20 days. So hopefully the heat mat will help. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to start eggplant seeds. Now these are both the Black Beauty variety. It is a very classic large eggplant. One is a fresh packet of seeds I bought, and the others are seeds that I saved, but I'm not sure those are viable. And I don't want to risk only starting those. So I'm going to plant those to see if they germinate and plant the ones that I know will be good. So we're going to use 2-inch soil blockers, and I've already made them with this soil blocker, and I've used the 10 by 10 Bootstrap Farmer, very sturdy, durable, strong tray. And 25 squares will fit in there. Now these are heirloom seeds. And what I did last summer is I left the first fruit to grow, and I left it for the whole summer. And right before the first freeze, I harvested it for its seeds. So we'll see if those seeds are viable. Now you want to start your eggplant seeds inside on a heat mat. They require it to be 75 to 90 degrees to germinate. I went ahead and put them under lights, but light's not required at this point. But heat is. The lights are on a timer for 14 hours on, but the heat mat is plugged in to run 24 hours a day. It's not going to go off and on. Now you're going to start your eggplant seeds now, 8 to 12 weeks before your last freeze. And typically our average last freeze is at the end of April. So we have 11 weeks right now before our last freeze, so it's perfect timing. When they're about 2 inches with well-developed roots, we're going to pot them up into bigger pots, about this size. Then we'll plant them outside in the garden towards the end of May. You want to wait 3 to 4 weeks past your last freeze. You're going to plant them a little bit later than your peppers. They're very sensitive to the cold. I also want big, strong eggplants because we typically out in the garden have flea beetles, and they will just put tiny pinprint holes in those leaves, and if the plants are small, it totally destroys them. But tall plants, even though the leaves get eaten on, it doesn't hurt the plant. So we want big, strong plants to put out into the garden. Now, like I said, they don't require light to germinate, but they do require moisture. So I like to put a little bit of soil on top of the hole in the middle of the soil block. Now, if it's warm enough, these should germinate in about 7 to 14 days. I did about half and half. 2 rows of my saved seed and 3 rows of the new fresh seed from Baker Creek. Now, if they all germinate, I'm going to have plenty of plants to share with the community. And never water with cold water. It's going to cause cold shock and the plants are going to die. I always have several watering cans filled up with water, and I leave it in this warm room. So always water with warm water. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to start broccoli rabe. We're going to use 2-inch soil blocker. And a sturdy 10 by 10 bootstrap farmer tray. We're also going to use a dome. You'll see it referred to as a greenhouse dome or a humidity dome. The seeds are from Baker Creek. They are heirloom. Hang on a second. And this is the soil we're going to use. It's ProMix organic garden potting soil. The seeds are tiny, and we're going to put 3 in each hole of the soil blocks. It's 10 weeks before our last freeze, and you're going to read a variety of recommendations on when to start broccoli seeds inside. I found the range of 4 weeks to 9 weeks before. But we're going to start at 10 weeks before our last freeze. Now, broccoli seeds don't require light to germinate. So I like to put a little bit of soil on top of each seed. And the dome is going to help hold in the moisture and help with germination. They're going to germinate in 7 to 14 days. It's an exciting time with so much growing. We're going to put this broccoli outside about mid-April, 2 weeks before our last freeze. Here, our last frost tends to be at the end of April. When they're a few inches tall and have developed some roots, we'll pot them up into these bigger pots. We're also going to use some of these cheaper pots to share with our community because 16 broccoli plants is too many for me. We're going to use this for my husband Dale's salads. Now, did you see all the lettuce I have growing? It's been our lettuce growing this winter in the basement. I haven't had to buy lettuce since November. Now, let me know what's going on under your grow lights. What vegetable or flower seeds you've already started. It's an exciting time. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's time for a seedling update. So much has germinated. What an exciting time. Now the onion seeds were sown 16 days ago. They've germinated quickly. I've already thinned most of them, but there's a few more left to thin. When they have 3 leaves, we're going to pot them up. And the vinca flowers have germinated well. Remember that I read, it's complicated to get them to germinate. You got to put them in a dark plastic bag for 21 days. But then I read, no, just cover them with soil and that's dark enough. And it worked. It's really exciting. Now the petunias, they're still working on germination. They're slower. I think it's because these were my own saved seeds and not all of them were viable. I went ahead and sowed a few more seeds yesterday. The petunias and vinca were sown 14 days ago. Now my saved snapdragon seeds, they've really germinated well. They're in there pretty thick and they're so tiny, but we're going to have to thin them later. Right now they're just too small. And these were started 9 days ago. Now the stalk have come up quickly. They were up in only 4 days, and I sowed those 9 days ago. I'm really happy with the germination rate for this stevia. Hang on, I'm looking at my notes. I sowed those 9 days ago, and I'm going to leave that dome on to see if I can get any more to germinate. Because remember, it's a challenge because most stevia seeds are sterile. The red cabbage is looking good. It germinated quickly too, in only 4 days. I sowed those 9 days ago, and we're going to pot those up soon. I'm really surprised some of these eggplant have already germinated in just 4 days. Peppers we sowed 4 days ago too, but it's really not been enough time for those to have come up. But look how beautiful all this lettuce is. We only sowed those 3 weeks ago. And it's almost time to start harvesting them. We're growing these inside for the winter for dill salad. I love all this green here in the grow room. I love this feeling of new life. Have you already started some seeds? Let me know what's growing. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to start moringa seeds. We're going to start them indoors. Here's what they look like. Now moringa seeds are large, and we're going to start them in pots and big soil blocks. Let me show you how I make those. You're going to want to press it in really firmly along these edges. And pack it in well. Make sure you level off the bottom. So you're going to want to take your time, squeeze the handle, jiggle it a little bit, squeeze it some more, and just work it loose. If it crumbles or falls apart when you take it off, it means that the soil's too dry and you need to add some more water. It's going to take you time to figure out the best way to make these large soil blocks. Now we're going to use a heat mat because moringa seeds need a temperature between 80 and 90 degrees to germinate. Now the instructions on the back of the packet say to soak the moringa seeds 2 to 3 days. I've never done it that way. I've grown it for several years. But if these don't germinate, then I might give that a try. But if you want to go ahead and soak it from the beginning, it's going to be 2 to 3 days. And pick the biggest seeds out of the packet. We're going to put 1 per soil block. Now we're going to make sure the soil makes contact with the seeds to hold in the moisture. And we'll put some more soil on top of those soil blocks. And last, we're going to add a humidity dome. It's going to help also hold in the moisture. And the seeds are going to germinate in 14 to 21 days. Now, here our last frost date is the end of April. And I'm going to start hardening things off at the beginning of May and then plant them out in the garden late May. This is a highly nutritious green. It's the top one that I grow, and it's been easy to grow. So come on back and follow our journey in growing moringa. Good morning, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to start beet seeds indoors under lights. Now we're going to use 2-inch soil blocks. I've already prepared a couple of trays. Now you can direct sow your beets outside 4 weeks before your last freeze, which means the beginning of April. But I grow in a very small space and I like to have more control, and I've learned the best way for me to grow beets is to start them indoors. It's 10 weeks before our last freeze right now, which is going to give me a month to grow them indoors and then 2 weeks to harden them off before planting them out in the garden. I don't plan to pot them up. I'm just going to leave them in the soil blocks. It worked really well last year. Now starting them in soil blocks can impact the shape. My beets tend to be more of a pear shape than circular, but I'm just growing them for the family. If I was selling them, I might start them in a different way. Now, one beet seed is usually actually more than one seed together. So we're just going to put one beet seed in each soil block. Now, it's going to require a temperature between 50 to 80 degrees to germinate. And this room tends to be 65 to 75, so that's just perfect. Now the variety is Detroit dark red beets, and it is an heirloom. They're originally from Baker Creek. Now this winter I've left a few beets out in the garden, hoping in spring they'll send up a flower head and I can save my own seed. Now I'm going to put a little bit of soil on top of each seed to help hold in the moisture. And we're going to top it all with a humidity dome. They're going to germinate in about 5 to 12 days. Good morning, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to start okra seeds. And we're going to use my own saved seeds. And these are a mixture of red burgundy okra and green Clemson spineless okra. I've grown these for many years, and here in north central Maryland, I cannot buy good fresh okra. And the frozen varieties here are terrible. They're very inedible. There's lots of fibrous parts in them, and it's just not good. But I have a short growing season here, and it's not exactly the heat that okra loves. So I've learned to start it early indoors. Now, if you research, it's going to tell you to start at 4 to 6 weeks before your last freeze. But I've discovered I need more time. I want big, strong plants before I transplant them out. So it's 10 weeks before our last frost, and I want to start them now. Now we're going to use the big soil blocks because okra likes to be direct sown. It doesn't like its root disturbed. So I don't want to start them in the 2-inch soil blocks and then pot them up. I've tried that in the past and they've died. So we're going to use these big soil blocks, but you can also use big pots. But let me show you how I made these. So you really want to work it into these edges really well. And you want to press it in nice and firm. Now we're going to take these 2-inch soil blocks and put them down in the middle. We're also going to set this on a heat mat because okra seeds need a temperature between 85 and 95 degrees to germinate. Now here's the size of the okra seed. And a good rule is you're going to plant your seeds double the depth of their size. So these holes are the perfect depth. We don't need to make them any deeper. And we're going to put 2 seeds per hole, and later we'll thin. Now some people will soak their okra seeds or score them on sandpaper, but I don't do that. I just simply put some soil on top and make sure it has contact to hold in the moisture. Now for all my seeds, I like to cover with a humidity dome to hold in the moisture, and when they germinate, I take it off. These should germinate in 7 to 14 days. We're going to start moving them outside to get used to the temperature, the wind, and the sun at the beginning of May. Then we're going to put them in the ground towards the end of May. It's going to depend on the weather. I hope that helps you if you're curious how to grow okra in a more northern climate. Come back and check for an update. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to pot up onions. Now I've already prepared some 4-inch pots. And the soil we're going to use is Pro Mix Organic Garden Potting Soil. I really like that it's been inoculated with microscopic fungus. It helps to inoculate the soil and it helps the root system. Now we sowed these onion seeds 3 weeks ago. Now in 2 weeks, we're going to start bringing these outside to get used to the weather, the wind and the sun. It's called hardening them off. It's going to be about 6 weeks before our last frost. You can start hardening them off anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks before your last frost. Here that means at the beginning of March. And 2 weeks after that, we're going to plant them into the garden in a sunny location. And that's going to be 4 weeks before our last freeze. That's going to be mid-March here. Now, the onions are going to stay in these pots 1 month before putting them out into the garden. Now, you could leave them in the soil blocks 1 more month, but I have the pots, the soil, the time, and the space, so I'm going to go ahead and pot them up. I just want to give them more room to grow, but that's really not necessary. Now, whether you leave them in the soil blocks or pot them up, you do want to thin them at about 2 to 3 weeks after you've sown them, and you only want 1 onion plant per block or pot. Now, some people trim the tops of their onions, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to leave them as they are. Now, onions require cool weather to grow the green tops, the green leaves. And the onion need nice big green tops, leaves, to grow a big bulb. Those leaves collect the energy from the sun to make that bulb. And that's the reason I'm not going to trim my tops. So each leaf develops a layer of the onion, the rings. Each leaf is responsible for developing their own layer. So the more leaves you have, the bigger your onions are going to be. An onion tends to have about 8 to 12 leaves, but not all of them are going to survive to maturity. In young onions, 1 or 2 leaves are going to kind of die off. Now, if cool weather helps the leaves grow and develop, what causes them to bulb up? Well, that's based on the light from the sun, how long the day is, how many hours of daylight they're getting. When they hit the required number of hours of daylight, then they start forming those bulbs. So if you're growing long day onions, which require 14 hours of sunlight to start developing bulbs, if you're growing those in the deep south, you're never going to have bulbs. Now in the south, you need to grow what's called short day onions. They only require 12 hours of light to start bulbing up. Then there's intermediate day onions, and they require 12 to 14 hours of sunlight to develop bulbs. Now here in north central Maryland, I can grow both intermediate day and long day onions. Now I'm growing 3 varieties, 2 long day and 1 intermediate day. These are Walla Walla onions. And less of them germinated, so if I have 2 growing together in one block, I can separate them and pot them up individually. Now Walla Walla are a sweet, short storage onion. I'm also growing Spanish yellow sweet onions, and those store for 6 months, and a small red Italian flat onion. And it's an heirloom, and it'll also store for about 6 months, and I'm using my own saved seeds. Now they do best growing leaves at 55 degrees to 65 degrees, but this room tends to run 65 to 75 degrees. So after I get them all potted up, I'm going to move them to the front room in the basement where it's colder. It's going to be the perfect place. Now I'm going to want to make sure I label these onions, because these Walla Walla onions, they're bigger and they're going to require more space than the red flat Italian onions, which is a small onion and requires less space. Plus, those are going to be ready in only 60 days, but the Walla Walla are going to take double the time at 125 days. So I want to make sure I plant them together so that when the little red Italian onions are done, I can harvest them and use that space for something else. Now I've got 1 tray left and several of each variety. So I'm going to get these potted up, then I'm going to show you their new home. They're going to grow in this location inside under the lights for 2 more weeks. Check back with us for an update. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today we're going to pot up red cabbage. Now we're going to pot these up into 4-inch pots. Now I have more red cabbage than I can use, so I'm going to go ahead and use these cheaper pots so I can share these with the community. And the cabbage I'm going to keep, I'm going to put in these really sturdy pots that I like to keep for myself. Now the soil I'm going to use is ProMix Organic Garden Potting Soil. Now some of the soil blocks have more than 1 red cabbage seedling that's germinated. So I'm going to thin, but I'm going to use these scissors because I'm afraid that if I pull up the extras, it's going to damage the roots. So we're going to use these really fine tip scissors. We're going to sleeve 1 seedling in each soil block. Now we sowed these seeds 4 weeks ago. And they germinated really quickly. It only took 4 days. Now, red cabbage germinates best at 70 to 75 degrees. And this furnace room, it's perfect. It tends to run 65 to 75. Now they're going to grow inside under lights for 3 more weeks. Now, mid-March, we're going to start bringing them outside every day for a few hours to get used to the weather, the wind, the sun, and the temperature. Then we're going to plant them out in the garden at the beginning of April. Now they've gotten a little bit leggy, so we're going to put some more soil up around the stem. Now they're going to grow best in a little bit cooler location. So we're going to move them over to the other end of the basement where the room tends to run 55 to 65 degrees. And that's just going to be perfect. Good morning, and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today, we're going to pot up broccoli. We're going to use 4-inch pots, and I've already got them prepared. Now we're going to use these 2 different kind of pots because I love sharing plants with my community. I have a shelf set up behind the garage where I give away plants for free. So these sturdy black pots, they're a little more expensive than something I want to give away. But these are reasonably priced, and I don't mind people keeping these. Now the soil we're going to use is ProMix. It's their organic garden potting soil variety. Here's what it looks like. I like that it comes compacted with a handle. It's easy for me to store. Now technically this is broccoli rabe, but it's going to be the exact same way you're going to plant up broccoli that forms big heads. First, we need to thin. And I'm going to use these special pointed tip embroidery scissors because we sowed more seeds than one in each soil block, but we just want one seedling per pot. Now, we sowed these seeds 2 weeks ago. And they germinated really quickly. It only took 3 days. But they're getting leggy right now, so I'm going to want to make sure I plant them deep and put some soil around the stem. I'm going to do it carefully because those little stems are fragile and I don't want to pinch them. Broccoli seeds germinate best between 70 and 75 degrees. And this furnace room tends to run 65 to 75, so that's just perfect. But they're going to grow best at 40 to 70 degrees. So after I get them potted up, I'm going to bring them to the front of the basement and put them with the red cabbage where it's cooler. It tends to run 55 to 65 degrees in that front room. So it's 9 weeks before our last frost. And these are going to stay inside growing under the lights 5 more weeks. Now 4 weeks before our last frost, at the beginning of April, we're going to start hardening them off. Bring them outside so they can get used to the weather, the wind and the sun and the temperature. A few hours out, a few hours in. And we'll slowly increase their time. Then 2 weeks before our last frost, we're going to plant them out into the garden. That's going to be mid-April. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. Today it's 9 weeks before our last frost and it's time to pot up our snapdragons. Now I've already prepared the 4-inch pots. We're going to use my favorite potting soil, Pro Mix. I like that it comes compacted with a handle and it's easy for me to store. Today we're using their organic garden potting soil mix. Now, snapdragon seeds are tiny. So I knew when I sowed these I would have to thin. These are too thick. But I'm going to wait until after I pot them up so I can see them better. And I'm going to use these embroidery scissors. We sowed these seeds 4 weeks ago. They germinated really quickly, in only 4 days. Now, they germinate best between 60 and 70 degrees, and this furnace room is 65 to 75, so it's just perfect. Now, these seeds do require light to germinate. You need to just surface sow them. Don't cover them with soil. Now, they're going to grow inside under lights for 4 more weeks. Now I'm looking for the thickest stem or one that's kind of set apart from the clump. Just have to be really careful cutting in there. And here's what it looks like. Now snapdragons prefer cool weather, 40 to 70 degrees, and this room tends to run 65 to 75, so it's kind of on the border. But our cooler room is full, so I'm going to leave these in here to continue to grow. Now we have 7 more, and we're going to pot those up and add them to the front room, which is cooler. It runs 55 to 65 degrees. And we're going to put them with the stock that we just potted up. Now we're going to start bringing these outside 4 weeks before our last frost, at the beginning of April. We need them to get used to the weather, the wind, the sun, and the temperature. Then we're going to plant them into the green stalk planter mid-April, 2 weeks before our last frost. Now let's finish thinning these and then move them to the cooler room. Now we're going to compare to see if that 10 degrees difference in temperature makes any difference in the growth. We could put one more light next year in that front room. Good morning and welcome back to Withrow Urban Homestead. It is time to pot up those spring, cool-loving veggies and flowers. So today we're going to pot up the flowers stalk. Now I've already prepared our 4-inch pots. And we're going to use ProMix Organic Garden potting soil. But first we need to thin each soil block down to one plant. And we're going to use these embroidery scissors because I don't want to damage the roots by pulling up the extra seedlings. Now this is my first time growing stock. And I read that can be hard to germinate, but I was really successful. It germinated with only 4 days. It was simple. Now we sowed these seeds 4 weeks ago. And they do require light to germinate. So I just put the seeds in the holes in the soil blocks, but I didn't top them with soil. And I watered them in. They germinated. Now they're going to grow inside under lights for 5 more weeks. And 4 weeks before our last frost, we're going to start hardening them off outside to get them used to the wind and the sun and the temperature. And that's going to be the beginning of April. Then we're going to plant them out into the garden mid-April, 2 weeks before our last frost. Stock likes cool spring weather, and it actually doesn't set any new flower heads above 65 degrees. So these plants would probably be happier down in the other room of the basement where it's cooler. Here in this furnace room, it tends to run 65 to 75 degrees, but that other room is full. So we're going to do an experiment. We're going to leave these 18 plants here in this room, but I've got 6 more that we're going to pot up and put into that front room, which is 55 to 65 degrees, and then compare which grows better. Because the point right now is not to develop those flower heads, but strong plants. So let's go ahead and finish getting these last 6 potted up. Then we're going to put those in the front cool room. These are going to be beautiful in the green stalk planters. Thank you for visiting Withrow Urban Homestead. See you later. Bye-bye.